The wind cut through Andrew Miller's coat like knives, but he tightened his grip on the thermos of soup and pushed the stroller forward through the snow anyway. "Daddy cold," his 4-year-old daughter, Ava, mumbled, her small voice barely rising over the gusts. "I know, sweetheart." "Just a few more blocks," he said, pulling the thin blanket higher around her and praying it was enough to keep her warm. The city was in chaos after the sudden storm hit. Streets were iced over, buses delayed, and taxis nowhere in sight. Andrew had picked Ava up from daycare early when the snow started, but their usual bus never came. So they walked. Or rather, he walked and pushed Ava through the slush, one weary step at a time. That's when he saw her. Curled on a frozen bench near the corner of Lexington and 51st, her designer coat soaked and clinging to her body, was a woman clearly not used to this kind of cold. People passed her by without a glance, too busy, too cold, too self-absorbed, but Andrew stopped. "Hey," he called out, shifting Ava's stroller closer to the bench. "Are you okay?" The woman looked up, startled. Her eyes were sharp blue but dazed. I'm fine," she said, though her lips trembled and her fingers were red from the cold. "You don't look fine. I had a driver. He left." "I thought I could walk to the Carlisle," but she broke off, pressing her hands together for warmth. Andrew didn't hesitate. He opened the thermos and poured steaming soup into the plastic cup he always carried with him. "Here," he said, holding it out. "It's just chicken noodle, but it's hot." The woman stared at him, at the poor man with a child in a second-hand stroller, offering her soup like she was the one in need. Then slowly she took it. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer now. "You didn't have to stop. I've got a kid. I know what it's like to need help and not get it." She sipped the soup, and some color returned to her cheeks. Ava peeked over the side of the stroller, her cheeks flushed pink. "Daddy made that soup." "Did he now?" the woman said, managing a faint smile. "It's really good," Andrew shrugged. "It's cheap and warm, that's about all I can promise." She looked like she wanted to say something else, but then a sleek black SUV pulled to the curb. A man in a suit jumped out and opened the door. "Miss Hale. Oh God, I've been looking everywhere. Please, let's get you inside." She stood, handed the empty cup back, and looked at Andrew for a long second. Then she pulled a sleek black wallet from her coat. "No," he said quickly. "You don't have to do that." "I know I don't," she said, her voice calm now, "but I want to." He shook his head. "I didn't stop to get paid." That seemed to surprise her, genuinely. She looked down at Ava, who waved at her with mittened fingers. "Bye, soup lady," the woman laughed. "Bye, sweetheart." She climbed into the car, and just before the door shut, she said, "My name's Delilah Hale." Andrew gave a polite nod. "Andrew." Then she was gone. Delilah didn't sleep that night. She had meetings stacked back to back the next day, a board presentation to finalize, and a global logistics report to read through. But all she could think about was Andrew Miller, the man in the worn coat, with kind eyes and a daughter who looked at him like he hung the stars. He didn't ask who she was, didn't care about her title, he just offered soup. And it shook her more than she wanted to admit. 3 days later, she found him again. She had her assistant track down every child care center in Midtown until she found Ava Miller. From there, it didn't take long to learn where Andrew worked part-time janitor at a community center and nights at a diner doing dishes. It was snowing again when she stepped into the diner. No driver, no suit, just jeans, boots, and a wool coat. Andrew was stacking plates behind the counter when she walked in. He paused. "You're kidding," Delilah smiled. "Hi, soup guy." He dried his hands on a towel, stunned. "What are you doing here? You gave me soup." "I figured I'd return the favor," she said, sliding into a booth. "I'd like to buy you dinner," he laughed quietly. "I'm working." "I checked. Your shift ends in 10 minutes. He looked at her, then down at his apron. "Let me just clock out." Dinner was at a tiny Italian place 3 blocks away. It wasn't fancy, but the pasta was fresh and the lights were warm and low. They talked for hours. He told her about working 2 jobs to pay rent, trying to give Ava a good life since her mom left them 2 years ago. She told him about taking over her father's logistics empire at 28 and how she hadn't dated in over 4 years because every man she met wanted her money or her name. "I Googled you," he admitted over coffee. "You're worth a lot." She raised an eyebrow. "Offended?" "No. Just surprised someone like you would walk into a place like mine." She tilted her head. Someone like me, you're Delilah Hale, CEO of Hale Global. I'm a guy who offered you soup. And that, she said, is exactly why I came back. Over the next few weeks, they saw each other again. And again, and again. He cooked her dinner in his small apartment. She took him and Ava to a winter festival uptown. He helped her fix a leaky faucet in her penthouse when her building's maintenance team flaked. She brought him coffee at his job just to see him smile. I haven't felt this normal in years, Delilah whispered one night, curled up beside him on his worn couch. He kissed her forehead. You deserve normal. You deserve more than that, she smiled. So do you. But not everything was simple. One night, a tabloid snapped a photo of them together outside his apartment. The headline read, Ice Queen CEO dating broke single dad. And it spread like wildfire. The next morning, she walked into a board meeting and was met with whispers and judgmental stares. You're damaging the brand, one executive said coldly. This isn't a good look for Hale Global. Delilah stood icy calm. Andrew Miller is a better man than anyone in this room. And if you think my personal life affects my ability to run this company, you're free to resign. No one said another word, but Andrew saw the article too. When she showed up at the community center that night, he looked tense. I don't want Ava dragged into this, he said. She won't be, Delilah promised. I don't want you to get hurt either. I know how this world works. You're rich, I'm not. They'll eat us alive. She stepped closer. Then let them try. He hesitated, but when she reached for his hand, he didn't pull away. Are you scared? She whispered. Terrified, he said, but I'm more scared of losing you. Delilah smiled softly. Then don't. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her right there in the hallway, like the world could fall apart and he'd still choose her, and in that moment she knew she was already falling for him, hard. Andrew stood outside the doors of the private school, uncertainty tightening across his chest like a vise. The stone building looked like something out of an old novel, all ivy-covered walls and brass fixtures. Children in crisp uniforms filed past him, laughing and clutching leather-bound notebooks, while parents in tailored coats talked over steaming coffees beside polished Blacktown cars. He adjusted Ava's jacket and crouched to meet her eyes. You remember what we talked about? Ava nodded, her pigtails bouncing. Be kind, be brave, say thank you. That's my girl. He kissed her forehead and stood just as a woman in a navy blazer approached with a clipboard and a gentle smile. Mr. Miller, I'm Miss Carlton, head of early development. Her voice was pleasant, but her eyes flicked to his worn jacket, the frayed strap on his bag. We're very excited to welcome Ava. Thanks, he said, his voice clipped. Still not sure how she got in. The wait list was supposed to be a mile long. Miss Carlton didn't answer directly. She'll be in the Bluebell classroom. Mrs. Whitmore is exceptional. Ava kissed his cheek and took the woman's hand, skipping toward the doors with the same fearlessness she'd shown since the day she learned to walk. Andrew watched her go, heart twisting between pride and disbelief. He turned to leave, only to find Delilah leaning against a sleek burgundy Maserati parked a few feet away. She wore an ankle-length gray coat belted at the waist, black sunglasses pushed up into her hair. She looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion editorial. He raised an eyebrow. You did this. I made a call, she said simply. She deserves the best. And what, you just happen to know the head of admissions, board of trustees, she said lightly. I fund their arts program. Andrew stared at her, jaw tightening. You can't just drop things like this into our lives. I didn't do it for you, she replied. I did it for her. He folded his arms. She's going to get used to things we can't give her. Delilah's smile faded. Then let me help. That's not how this works. Why not? Her voice was quiet now, serious. You act like there's some rulebook that says a man like you and a woman like me can't be in the same story. He exhaled sharply, looking away. Maybe there is. Delilah stepped forward, her voice softer. I know what it feels like to be told you don't belong somewhere. I spent years proving I deserved to be in rooms full of men who thought I was just a figurehead in designer heels. I didn't ask for your pride, Andrew. I asked for your trust. He looked at her, struggling to find words. But then her phone rang a sharp, insistent tone that broke the moment like glass. She glanced at the screen, her expression hardening. I have to go, she said. Emergency board session. One of our logistics hubs in Marseille just caught fire. Andrew didn't stop her. She climbed into the Maserati and drove off, leaving behind a swirl of exhaust and a silence that felt heavier than it should have. That night, Andrew lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Ava was curled against his side, dreaming, one hand clutching her stuffed rabbit. He thought about the school, the way her eyes lit up when she saw the art room, how she hugged him so tightly before walking in, and he thought about Delilah. She'd never once flaunted her wealth. She never made him feel small, he did that to himself. But still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was chasing something too far above him. At sunrise, he made a decision. He called her. She picked up after 2 rings, voice groggy but alert. "Andrew, I owe you an apology," he said. "I was rude. You were honest. Still, I was scared." Her voice softened. "Of what?" He hesitated. "Of needing you too much." There was a pause. "Then you're allowed to need someone, Andrew, even if it's me." The silence between them was warm now, familiar. "Can I see you?" he asked finally. "Tonight," she said. "My place." When he arrived, the doorman greeted him with a tight nod, clearly unimpressed by his faded jeans and scuffed boots. The elevator was lined in velvet and gold, and he could see his reflection staring back at him from the polished paneling. He looked out of place, like a misplaced puzzle piece. But when the doors opened, Delilah was waiting barefoot in a sweater the color of smoke, her hair loose around her face. There was no pretense, no armor, just her. She led him to the rooftop, where a small table had been set for 2 beneath a canopy of twinkling lights. The skyline glittered like a sea of diamonds behind her. "You did all this?" he asked. "Figured if I was going to scare you away, I might as well go big." He laughed, tension easing from his shoulders. "You're not scaring me." They ate slowly, the city humming softly below them. She poured him wine. He told her about his first job fixing vending machines. And she confessed she once got lost in her hotel during a merger in Seoul and missed her own press conference. They were halfway through dessert when she leaned back and said, "I want to ask you something." He met her gaze. "Okay. If this were reversed, if I were the one living paycheck to paycheck, if Ava wasn't in that school, if I didn't have the penthouse or the Maserati, would you still be here?" Andrew didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I didn't fall for the CEO," he said. "I fell for the woman who sat on a bench in the snow and still said thank you." Delilah swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around her glass. "I don't let people get this close." "Then let me stay close." She reached for his hand across the table. "I'm not used to being the one who needs someone," he squeezed gently. "You don't have to be used to it. You just have to let it happen." For the first time in years, Delilah let herself lean into someone without needing to control the fall. They sat there until the candles burned low, until the wind picked up and she brought him inside, until they stood in the silence of her bedroom, neither of them needing to speak. And when she rested her head against his chest, he wrapped his arms around her like it was where she belonged. But the world outside wasn't done with them. The next morning, Delilah arrived at Hale Global to find her office door already open. Her assistant stood just inside, pale and nervous. "What happened?" Delilah asked, her voice sharp. "There's been a leak," she said. "Your emails with Andrew. Photos, financial records. Someone's trying to make it look like he's manipulating you." Delilah's blood turned to ice. "Where's the file?" Her assistant handed it over with shaking hands. "It's already spreading. Investors are panicking. The board wants a private session tomorrow." She opened the folder. There were screenshots out of context messages, even a photo of Andrew entering her building late at night. They were painting him as a gold digger. Delilah's hands trembled, but her eyes were pure steel. "Find out who's behind this. I don't care how." "Yes, ma'am." As her assistant fled, Delilah sank into her chair, heart pounding. She had built an empire by never letting anyone see her bleed. But this wasn't just business, this was Andrew and Ava. And she would burn the whole boardroom to the ground before she let anyone hurt them. Andrew stared at the screen in disbelief. The article had been forwarded to him by a coworker at the diner, followed by a string of awkward silences and diverted glances. There, in high resolution, was his face next to Delilah's, beneath a headline that read like a slap. "Billionaire CEO falls for single dad, or is it all a setup?" He shut the laptop, jaw clenched. The photo showed him carrying a grocery bag, looking like a man barely holding things together. side by side with Delilah, who looked effortlessly pulled together even in a candid shot. The contrast was brutal. He didn't answer the texts from the few people who reached out. He didn't know how to explain something he didn't understand himself. All he knew was that someone had gone digging and they'd found enough to twist. When he picked Ava up from school, the receptionist avoided eye contact, and one of the other parents gave him a thin, pointed smile that made his skin crawl. That night, he didn't sleep. He lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, thinking about every time he'd let himself believe this could work. Every moment he let himself hope. He'd told Delilah he wasn't scared anymore. That was a lie. He was terrified of what this would mean for Ava, for her future. For the quiet, stable life he'd worked so damn hard to build. At dawn, he called his manager at the community center and took a leave. Then he packed a bag for Ava and drove her 3 hours north to his sister's place in Beacon. She didn't ask many questions when he showed up on her porch, just hugged him hard and let him in. The next evening, Delilah knocked on the door. His sister opened it, startled to see a woman in a black coat with rain dripping from her hair, holding a small suitcase in one hand. "Is Andrew here?" He stepped into view, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. Delilah looked exhausted. "I had to find you." "You shouldn't have come," he said. "I know you're angry." "I'm not angry. I'm protecting my daughter." Delilah's voice broke just slightly. "It wasn't me. Someone on the board, maybe several of them. They're trying to force an emergency vote to remove me. They fed the story to the press." "I don't care about your boardroom games." She stepped closer. "You think I don't know that? I've spent years building walls so no one could get close enough to use me. And now, I finally let someone in, and they still found a way to twist it. But I'm not walking away just because they're uncomfortable with the fact that I fell for someone who doesn't wear a custom suit to breakfast." Andrew's mouth tightened. "This isn't just about you and me. They dragged Ava into it." "I know." She swallowed hard. "Which is why I'm stepping down." His breath caught. "What?" "I submitted a letter of resignation this morning, effective immediately. I'm liquidating part of my shares to start a private fund for small businesses and community centers in the city, including yours. I'm done with the board. Done with the people who measure worth in titles and bank balances. You gave up everything." She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded envelope, offering it to him. "Not everything, just what I never wanted to begin with." He didn't take it. "Delilah, this isn't a fairy tale. You don't get to walk away from $1 billion company and suddenly everything's fine." "I didn't walk away for everything to be fine," she said. "I walked away because I realized the only thing I couldn't afford to lose was you." His sister, still standing near the doorway, spoke quietly. "You should come in out of the rain." Delilah's eyes never left his. "That's not my call." Andrew's expression didn't change, but after a long pause, he stepped back and held the door open. Inside, Delilah sat at the small kitchen table while Andrew stood at the sink, watching her reflection in the window. Rain ticked against the glass. The house smelled like coffee and pancakes from earlier that morning. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "You're right." "I didn't." She folded her hands in her lap. "But I wanted to. And not because I'm trying to prove something to you. Because I looked at my life and realized that all the power in the world means nothing if I can't come home to someone who sees me when I'm not wearing it." He turned. "I don't know how this works anymore." "Neither do I," she said. "But I'd rather figure it out with you than go back to pretending I'm better off alone." There was a long silence. Then, from the hallway, Ava peeked out, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy," Andrew knelt and pulled her into his arms. "Hey, baby." She looked past him and saw Delilah. "You're here." Delilah smiled, her voice just above a whisper. "I missed you." Ava turned to Andrew. "Can we show her the stars?" He blinked. "The what?" "The ones you made." She tugged his hand. "Please." He hesitated, then stood and looked at Delilah. "Come on." They led her into the small bedroom where Ava stayed. The ceiling was covered in glow in the dark stars, arranged in constellations. Delilah looked up in wonder. She was scared of the dark, Andrew said. "So we learned the sky together." Ava pointed. "That one's Orion because he has a belt." Delilah looked at her, eyes shining. "You're very smart." "Daddy says you're smart too." Delilah crouched beside her. "He says a lot of good things about you, you know." Ava beamed. "Are you staying?" Delilah glanced at Andrew. "That's up to your dad." He sat down on the edge of the bed, his voice quiet. I don't know where this is going, but I want to find out. Delilah nodded. So do I. Ava crawled into bed and pulled the covers up to her chin. Then can we all watch the stars together? Delilah lay down on one side, Andrew on the other. And in the soft glow of the plastic constellations, their hands found each other beneath the blanket. The next morning, Andrew walked out onto the porch to find Delilah sipping coffee from a chipped mug. She wore one of his old flannel shirts over leggings, her hair pulled into a messy knot. She looked more beautiful than she ever had in a penthouse. I've been thinking, she said, not looking at him, about what comes next. He leaned on the railing beside her. Yeah, there's a building in Brooklyn I bought years ago. It's just sitting there. I thought maybe we could turn it into something real. A community kitchen. A safe space with after-school programs. Something that does more than just make money. He studied her. You're serious. I've never been more. He took a slow breath. You'd really give all that up, she turned to him. I didn't give anything up. I just stopped pretending that power without purpose was enough. He reached for her hand. Then let's build something that matters. And for the first time in a long time, Delilah felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be, not above the world, but right in the middle of it, hand in hand with the man who showed her that kindness was stronger than power. That love didn't need to be earned with titles or wealth. It only needed to be chosen. Every single day, the soft thrum of conversation filled the newly refurbished Brooklyn space as warm light spilled through the tall windows. The scent of roasted vegetables and garlic bread drifted from the kitchen, where a line of volunteers served dinner to a group of neighborhood families. Above them, a hand-painted wooden sign read, "The Orion Table," carved with a pattern of stars. Andrew adjusted the collar of his button-down shirt and glanced toward the far end of the room where Delilah stood beside Councilwoman Rivera, discussing future funding initiatives. Her posture was open, her gestures fluid, her voice calm but commanding. She wore a navy jumpsuit and low heels, professional but practical, nothing flashy. Nothing performative, nothing like the woman he'd first seen on that frozen bench. She caught his eye, and for a moment, the entire room faded. She stepped away from the councilwoman and walked toward him, weaving through the tables where kids colored on placemats and elderly couples shared stories over soup. You're pacing, she said, reaching for his hand. I'm not pacing, he replied. You're definitely pacing, he exhaled. I didn't think so many people would show up. You're feeding over 100 people tonight, she said. They came because they believe in what this place is. He looked around at the laughter, the warmth, the way people lingered even after eating. It doesn't feel real. It's real. Her voice dropped. You built this. We built it, she smiled. Together. Andrew turned toward the kitchen, where Ava was perched on a stool, her legs swinging beneath her as she carefully arranged bowls of cookies on a tray. She wore a tiny apron that read Head Taste Tester, a gift from one of the volunteers. She's been talking about this night all week, he said. She told her whole class she was hosting a star dinner. Delilah laughed. She's not wrong, he hesitated. She asked me something this morning. What did she say? She wanted to know if you'd be there when the stars come out. Delilah's throat tightened. And what did you say? I told her you always are. She reached for his collar and straightened it with a tenderness that made his pulse skip. You think this could be enough? I think this is everything. They turned as a voice rose from the stage near the back of the room. One of the volunteers, a high school senior named Marcus, stepped to the microphone and tapped it nervously. Hey, everyone. I just wanted to say thank you for coming, and also thanks to the people who made this place happen. Mr. Miller, Miss Hale, this community owes you more than you know. There was a wave of applause, chairs scraping as people stood to clap. Andrew flushed, overwhelmed, but Delilah took his hand and pulled him gently toward the stage. Marcus stepped aside and the crowd quieted. Andrew stared out at the sea of faces. For a moment he couldn't speak. Then he found Delilah's hand again, grounding him. This place started with a bowl of soup, he began, and a woman who could have walked away but didn't. Delilah's eyes glittered, but she said nothing. I didn't think much of it then, just a gesture, something small, but it changed everything, not just for me, for Ava, for all of us. He paused. We built this not because we had money or power or status. We built it because people matter, because kindness matters. Another round of applause rose, and Delilah stepped forward. I used to think love was something that came at a cost, she said. Something you had to earn or protect or hide, but I was wrong. The truth is, love doesn't ask for credentials, it just shows up, and sometimes it hands you soup in the middle of a snowstorm. Laughter rippled through the room, soft and warm. She turned to Andrew. You saved me that day. More than I realized, and every day since, you've reminded me what it means to be seen. Not for what I have, but for who I am. Andrew lowered the microphone. You're going to make me cry in front of an entire room of people. She leaned close. You already did that last week when Ava made you that card. He shook his head, smiling. As the crowd broke into conversation again, Delilah pulled Andrew to the side near the windows. Through the glass, the first stars were beginning to wink through the dusky sky. Do you remember the night we watched the glow stars with Ava? She asked. He nodded. She made us promise to never take them down. Delilah reached into her purse and pulled out a small, flat box. I had this made. For the new office. He opened it to find a custom star map, a chart of constellations arranged in the sky as they appeared on the night they met. In the corner, engraved in tiny script, were the words, "The night everything changed." He stared at it, speechless. I wanted you to have something that reminded you, she said. Even when the world gets heavy. He closed the box gently. You have a habit of showing up exactly when I don't know I need you. She shrugged lightly. I guess I'm just observant. He drew closer, his voice quieter now. You gave up a lot to be here. I gained more than I ever had. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Us, I never thought I'd get something like this. You didn't get it, she said. You made it. The lights dimmed slightly inside as lanterns along the windows flickered to life. Someone started playing soft piano from the corner, and Ava was already spinning in slow circles on the floor, inviting anyone who passed to dance. Delilah held out her hand. Come dance with me, he hesitated. Here, right now. He took her hand. They moved slowly, surrounded by families and neighbors, by volunteers and kids in mismatched socks. It wasn't a ballroom. There was no chandelier, but it was perfect. Delilah leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. Do you remember what you said to me that night in the rain? She asked. I said I was more scared of losing you than anything else. Well, she whispered, I'm not scared anymore. His arms tightened around her. Neither am I. When the night wound down and the last plates were cleared, Andrew walked with Delilah and Ava to the car. Ava was half asleep in Delilah's arms, her head resting against her shoulder. They want to add literacy programs starting next month, Delilah said softly. Marcus asked about a mentorship partnership with the high school, too. Andrew smiled. You're already turning this into an empire. She looked over at him. No, just a home. He helped her buckle Ava into the backseat, then paused with the door open. I never asked for any of this, he said. But I'm glad it found me anyway. Delilah stepped forward, her voice low. I never believed in fate, but I believe in you. He kissed her slow, sure, with the kind of certainty that only comes from having lost before and knowing how rare second chances are. As the stars spread across the sky above them, they stood together on the sidewalk, no longer strangers from opposite worlds, but partners in one they'd built from scratch. A world where a single act of kindness had changed the course of everything. And now, nothing could ever pull them apart. The wind carried the scent of spring through the open windows of the old brownstone that now served as both a home and the headquarters for the Orion Foundation's growing programs. Bright laughter filtered in from the back garden, where Ava was running through the sprinklers with a pack of neighborhood kids, her sundress soaked, her cheeks flushed with joy. Andrew leaned against the doorframe, watching her with a quiet sense of awe. There was something sacred about this kind of happiness, organic, earned, and unshakable. The kind that had grown from choices made in the dark, from two people with scarred pasts choosing one another anyway. Delilah appeared beside him, barefoot in faded jeans and a white linen shirt. She was holding a clipboard, but the moment she noticed Ava's giggles echoing through the yard, she lowered it and leaned into Andrew's side without a word. You've been staring out there for 10 minutes, she said softly. I'm still trying to believe it's real. Well, the sprinkler's about to soak the herb beds again, so I can promise you it's very real. He chuckled under his breath and kissed her temple. "How was the meeting with the city rep?" She straightened, brushing a curl behind her ear. "Better than expected. They've approved the zoning changes. We can start renovations on the warehouse in Red Hook next month." "That's the one near the docks, right?" She tapped the clipboard. "It'll be perfect for the youth trade training program." "We've already got a list of apprenticeships lined up." Andrew took the clipboard from her and set it on the hallway table. "You haven't taken a break all day." She raised an eyebrow. "That's rich coming from the man who fixed 3 busted window frames before breakfast." He reached for her hand. "Come with me." "Where?" "Upstairs." She followed him without another question. The attic had been converted into a quiet retreat painted soft gray with skylights that bathed the room in natural light. A telescope sat in the corner, a gift from Delilah to Ava on her last birthday, and across one wall were dozens of Ava's drawings taped side by side. Stars, planets, people holding hands beneath glowing constellations. Andrew opened a small drawer in the built-in shelves and pulled out a thin, velvet-covered box. Delilah stilled. He didn't drop to one knee. He didn't make a speech. He just held it out for her to take, eyes steady, voice quiet. "I want this to be permanent." She didn't open the box immediately. Instead, she stepped closer, her fingers brushing his. "You're sure?" "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." She opened the box. Inside, nestled in dark velvet, was a simple gold ring with a single diamond flanked by 2 tiny sapphire stars. The design was unmistakably hers, elegant, intentional, and quietly breathtaking. "I designed it with Ava," he said. "She insisted on the stars." Delilah held the ring in her hand, her eyes suddenly glassy. "Everything I've built, everything I thought mattered, it all means more with you, with her. This life we've made. I didn't know I was capable of wanting something this much." Andrew slid the ring onto her finger. "Then say yes." She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him without hesitation, the kind of kiss that carried years of longing, discovery, and deep, unwavering love. Yes. Later that evening, the 3 of them sat around the fire pit in the backyard, wrapped in blankets. Ava toasted marshmallows with laser focus while Andrew and Delilah watched her, legs tangled beneath the quilt. "She told me she wants to be an astronaut and a chef," Andrew said. Delilah nodded solemnly. "Ambitious, I like it. She also said she wants a dog, but only if it can ride a skateboard. I can't promise the skateboard, but I might know a rescue shelter that has a few puppies." He turned to look at her. "You're serious?" Delilah smiled. "I'm not going to be the reason she doesn't have a dog." Ava perked up. "We're getting a dog," Andrew laughed. "We'll talk about it in the morning, but that's forever away." "Exactly," Delilah said. "Which means you'll have something to look forward to." Ava scowled playfully, then launched a marshmallow across the yard like a tiny, sticky comet. Delilah laughed so hard she nearly dropped her wine glass. By the time the stars came out, Ava was asleep against Delilah's lap, sticky fingers curled into the edge of the blanket. Andrew watched them both for a long time, the woman who had turned his life upside down, and the little girl who had anchored him through it all. "I was scared you'd disappear," he admitted quietly. Delilah didn't look away from the stars. "I was scared I'd never find anything that felt like home." He took her hand. "So this is it then?" She leaned her head against his shoulder. "This is it." Months passed. The Red Hook Center opened with a full scholarship program, and Marcus, now in his first year of college, returned every weekend to mentor new students. The Orion Foundation expanded to include mental health services, literacy nights, and a weekend food co-op. Delilah's former board members tried to lure her back twice. She said no both times without hesitation. She didn't need the empire. She'd already found what she was meant to build. On a crisp October afternoon, beneath a canopy of golden leaves, Andrew and Delilah were married in the backyard of the brownstone. It wasn't extravagant. There were no reporters or designer gowns. Just white lanterns hanging from the trees, a homemade cake, and Ava walking Delilah down the aisle in a flower crown she'd made herself. Marcus officiated. Delilah wore a simple dress with sleeves that fluttered in the wind. Andrew wore a navy suit that still had a tailor's tag tucked inside. When they exchanged vows, they didn't promise perfection. They promised effort, laughter, forgiveness, They promised to build and rebuild, to hold space for each other's dreams, and to never forget the moment everything changed: a snowstorm, a bench, and a bowl of soup. Ava insisted on the first dance being under the stars. So they danced, barefoot in the grass, to the sound of an old speaker playing a jazz ballad slightly out of tune. Later, after the music faded and the guests dwindled, Andrew and Delilah sat on the porch swing, her head against his shoulder, her hand resting over his heart. "This," he whispered, "was the life I never knew I wanted." Delilah met his gaze, her voice quiet but certain. "And the only one I'll ever need." The stars blinked above them, soft and endless, and the house behind them glowed warm with the kind of light that only comes from love forged through fire and chosen again and again. And in that space between the past and the future, between once and always, they stayed. Together. Forever.